Hey guys, welcome back to Adlib Talk, and this is my review for Season 1 of Halo. Before we start with this review, don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoy it, and please do consider subscribing. It's been years and years, but we finally got our Halo series. I still remember around 10 years ago when rumors came out of a Halo series, which was possibly in development to be produced by Steven Spielberg. It is clear to see that a lot of work and money has gone into this new series, with over $200 million for Season 1 being spent both for production and post-production works. However, from the beginning, it was clear to see that many fans of the game were not too happy about the approach that had been taken, such as the portrayal of Master Chief. Many fans claimed that many of the characters were interpreted the wrong way compared to how they were shown in-game. Then there's obviously issues such as Master Chief taking off his helmet and showing a more human side to the character than what we're used to, plot points going completely against Halo lore, and much, much more. However, this will not be how I will approach this review. I love Halo. I have enjoyed many of its campaigns, but I will not be nitpicking lore points or dishing the series for attempting a different approach to the franchise. I shall review Halo as a separate story, a separate timeline, and on its own merit as a sci-fi series, taking inspiration from a well-known IP. With that said, please note that there will be a lot of spoilers for all 9 episodes of the first season. So if you have not watched the whole season, please do first check out my Halo the series review for the first episode, which you can find linked above. So Halo the television series is a military sci-fi series based on the video game franchise of the same name, produced by a number of companies such as Showtime Networks, 343 Industries, Amblin Television, One Big Picture, and Chapter 11. The series follows a war between the United Nations Space Command, more commonly known as the UNSC, who have assumed responsibility of the defense of the human race, and the Covenant, who are a theocratic alien alliance. The Covenant believe that the Forerunner ring worlds, known as the Halos, will provide a path to salvation, and their leadership are determined to annihilate all human beings. And so, throughout the series, we see humanity under attack from the Covenant and a war being fought for the capture of the Keystones, which are the key to the discovery of Halo. We are first introduced to these Keystones all the way back in episode 1, which started off with a Covenant attack on the planet Madrigal, and the Master Chief and the rest of the Spartans of Silver Team intervening and defeating the Covenant forces. The Forerunner artifact is discovered, and long story short, this ends up on Reach, investigated by Dr. Catherine Halsey. There is a lot of boring politics which goes on in Reach, which didn't really interest me personally, together with a side plot involving teenager Quan Ha, who ends up with John, but eventually is left with Soren, who is an old friend of John's from the time when they were training to become Spartans together. The Quan Ha storyline is pretty much all filler and is extremely boring. We will talk about the writing later on in the review, and that is when I will have the opportunity to give you my true judgment on some of the questionable writing we have here. Anyways, we also have another storyline, one involving McKee, a ward of the Covenant prophets. She promises she will steal the artifacts and kill the Master Chief, whom they call the Demon. But in the process of doing this, ends up kind of falling in love with John, and a weird romance develops here. Finally, when talking about storylines, we also need to mention probably the most interesting one, minus all the Silver Team and Master Chief action, which is Halsey's descent coupled with the development of Cortana. These are all the major plot lines we see develop throughout the whole series, and it's fair to say that I was not too happy with many of the plot lines. Let's get one of the worst out of the way first. Like I already said, the Kwanha storyline was a mess. From start to finish, it's not that it did not have any redeeming qualities. I thought that Soren's character was a particularly interesting one, and that was helped quite a bit with a very good performance by Bokeem Woodbine, who imbued his character with a lot of charisma, stealing the show whenever he was on screen. Unfortunately, he had the character of Kwanha to bounce off on screen, which is kind of like trying to bounce a ball on a wall full of sharp spikes. I don't know if it was the poor writing for her character or the performance by Yerenha, but I just couldn't stand seeing her on screen. She was just incredibly annoying. This all culminates in episode 7, which is a completely Kwanha centric episode with Master Chief appearing only briefly. Yes, I know that we have this kind of portal portrayed in this episode that will probably lead humanity to Halo, but honestly, did we need to follow all this backstory just to get a small Easter egg which might be relevant next season? The Kwan and Soren storyline is cut off and so completely relevant to the rest of the action of season 1 that it feels like a complete waste of time and just a method by the writers to fill in the space with a storyline that requires very limited budget expenditure. The Master Chief storyline works much better for the most part. With the opening battle between Silver Team and the Covenant forces, it is clear to see that the showrunners were attempting to keep the vibe of the Halo action from the games present also in this series. The weapons and armor, the feel of the action with the shields and so on, all looking very good. Yes, some of the action felt a little floaty, but we'll get to that when we talk about the CGI in the series. For the most part, up to episode 1, I was more than happy with the way the character of Master Chief was being interpreted. And I would be lying if I said that seeing a more human side of Master Chief did not work for me. This was greatly helped by the impressive performances we got by Pablo Schreiber, whose facial expressions bring out a lot of the pain his character experiences as he learns about the terrible things that happened to him for him to become the Master Chief. This whole storyline works because we care about John, but also because the character of Halsey is extremely interesting. Natasha McElhone portrays Halsey as a delightfully evil character who's willing to sacrifice anything and everything for the survival of mankind. The way Halsey deals with Silver Team and specifically John, together with her attempts to gaslight him from discovering what truly happened in the past, is fascinating to see and leads to some of the most powerful emotional moments of this series. Now, the artifacts themselves are pretty much required MacGuffins for the Covenant and the UNSC to have something to fight over, and this also leads to some of the best moments of the series, i.e. the action in episodes 1, 5, and 9. I'll focus on the action and visuals later on in the review. The John and McKee relationship that develops from episode 6, however, never felt right. This is not to say that Charlie Murphy gives us a poor performance, because she definitely doesn't. I just feel like this relationship was severely underwritten, and the chemistry between the two never felt present, and so its culmination in episode 8 felt completely wrong, and a big reason why so many fans were so unhappy about it. If the writers had managed to build and develop a better romance and a better relationship between the two, I'm sure that many of the fans who were complaining about that particular scene would have accepted it happening more willingly, let's put it that way. One last point I'd like to make in this part of the review is on the character of Cortana. Cortana is an AI construct that was inserted into John's brain as a means of influencing the decisions he takes. Now, I'm so glad that American voice actress Jen Taylor was selected for the role, the same voice actress who voices Cortana in the games. Her ability to imbue Cortana with a certain element of emotion while still maintaining the feel of hearing an AI speak is incredible and requires a lot of talent. This ensures that the relationship that develops between Cortana and the Master Chief feels so much better than the one between John and Mackie. Cortana's decision in episode 8 to help John against Halsey's orders felt like a well-deserved development, the fruit of numerous arguments between herself and John, which would ultimately lead to kind of respect between the two characters and an acceptance. This then culminates in the final episode with Cortana forced by John to take control of his body and thus being able to save Silver Team whilst also escaping with both of the Keystones. This storyline, together with Halsey's, were two of the strongest aspects of the series and a reason why I'm still looking forward to watching Season 2 of Halo. Needless to say, minus the Quan Ha storyline, there is a lot of filler material here, with lots of UNSC politics boring me to tears. And this is where I believe the showrunners and writers need to work the hardest on for Season 2. I understand it is impossible to spend too much time on the Covenant because all that CGI costs a lot of money. And at the same time, it's impossible to have non-stop action throughout because, again, number one, it's very expensive, but also you need to develop the characters and you need to develop the story and the drama. However, the showrunners and writers seem incapable of writing actually interesting filler. Much of the time we spend on Reach with politicians bickering with each other was mind-numbingly boring, and another reason why I constantly seriously considered stopping this series. The visuals and CGI in this series are also unfortunately hit and miss. In my first review, I praised the CGI used in the first episode. The Covenant forces actually looked quite decent, as did the settings we saw throughout the first episode. The action was also portrayed particularly well, despite some characters having a certain floaty feeling, making it quite obvious what we were looking at was CGI. The Covenant aliens themselves look quite good, with the Prophets clearly getting a lot of attention. Now, I will take episode 9 as an example, though, of very poor CGI. Our first viewing of the Covenant world Hesduros is horrible. Honestly, it looks like the kind of CGI we had for PlayStation 2 games. Now, I understand this is a production made for television and that certain limitations must be expected, but still, it looked really bad. On the other hand, much of the action portrayed in that episode itself was also fantastically done, with exceptions here and there. So like I said, it's a mixed bag at the best of times, but overall I think fans can be satisfied that at least in the imagery the show has attempted to portray the Halo franchise in as accurate a way as possible. The armor, the weapons, the costumes all look impressive, and props to Giovanni Lipari for his excellent work on this aspect. One final disappointing aspect I feel I need to mention is the music. Halo's soundtracks are iconic to say the least. The theme song itself is one of the most well-known themes of any franchise in the world, and the fact that we only got short snippets of it throughout the series is seriously disappointing. But the fact that the music throughout the whole series felt so generic really did upset me. Mixed bag is how I would describe the Halo series. There were many moments when I honestly thought to myself, why am I watching this series? Why am I forcing myself to watch this kind of mediocrity? Because yes, there are many moments of mediocrity throughout the series. But when we get a great moment between Silver Team or an incredible action sequence such as in episode 5 or the admittedly very strong episode 6, for example, that hooked me right back in. One can only hope that showrunners Kyle Killen and Stephen Kane have understood what went wrong with season 1 and what, to be fair, worked well, and are able to develop a better storyline which hopefully focuses more on the Covenant, whose presence throughout felt rather limited. But what about my rating for season 1? In my opinion, Halo Season 1 deserves a 2.5 out of 5. It is a bang average series compared to other sci-fi productions and is far too inconsistent for me to actually recommend it to both fans of the game or fans of the genre. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed that review, and if you did, don't forget to leave a like on this video and please do consider subscribing. Cheers, and I'll see you guys next time right here on Adlib Talk.